Hey guys, Tim Miller from the Bulwark. It is Monday night, and who would I rather be with than my colleague Sam Stein, managing editor of the Bulwark, Florida man Marc Caputo on the MAGA beat. We have some news. Marco Rubio appears to be poised to be tapped as Donald Trump's Secretary of State. I guess I have a few thoughts on this I want to get into, but I guess Caputo, just on the straight news, that are you feeling like that is 100% or 99.5% or like 93%?
I mean, it's 100% unless Trump changes his mind, right?
That's not 100%.
It's never 100. So never 100.
But Trump, I'm saying, but Trump has made the decision. He apparently made it last week, and the idea was they were going to give it to the New York Times, and so that's what they did.
They love the New York Times, even though he hates the New York Times.
It's branded in his Big Apple brain.
Yeah.
Like, that's what matters.
I actually think that the New York Times decision for the leak ties to something else that is maybe, to call it a positive would be wrong, but something that is telling about the cabinet picks that are coming. But before we get to that, I would like for you to indulge me. Somebody who spent a lot of time with Marco. It is intriguing. I do believe this will be the first time, at least in modern times. I mean, there was, of course, Edward N. Stanton's tiff with LBJ, but I think in modern times, this is the first time that we've had a cabinet secretary who'd previously had a tangle with his boss over the size of his penis. Let's take a look at that.
Oh, fair enough.
You seen his hands? They're like this. And you know what they say about men with small hands? You can't trust them. You can't trust them. You can't trust them.
And just a little bit more. He also had this to say about how Donald Trump would run an administration.
It would be chaos. No one knows, but it would look probably like the positions he's held for all these years on many of these issues. He is wholly unprepared to be president of the United States.
Chaotic. I can see part of this administration. And then just one more. Can we just put it on screen? I just want to throw this up on screen for everybody. This is Marco Rubio's website in 2016. Look at this swag, guys. Hashtag Never Trump. Hashtag Never Trump hat. They have a hashtag Never Trump WWJD bracelet. A Never Trump bracelet, even the whole thing. I guess never meant never. Never didn't mean never for Marco, and he's in now.
You seem to overlook the dick jokes that Kathleen Sebelius used to tell about Barack Obama. So
really? Like, is that really
you missed
true?
that? He clearly obviously
you were on the inside there with your HHS reporting.
Well, first of all, can we stop for a second? One,
No.
You didn't tell people to subscribe, which I want people to subscribe. Two is I just felt like the energy was a little low when you said I wouldn't rather be anywhere else on a Monday night than with Sam and Marc.
That was a joke. I would. There's a million places I'd rather be than talking about fucking
this
Marco
is exactly
Rubio.
where I want to be. This is exactly
I'm
where I
happy
want
for
to be.
you. All right.
Thanks.
So I want to circle back to the New York Times thing, get your guys' take on both of this. I want to circle back to the New York Times thing because I do think it ties to these appointments in a way that speaks to the Trump psyche, which is there are going to be certain areas in this administration where he's going to appoint people that I personally find extremely noxious in areas where he has strong views on what might happen, particularly the immigration regime, and I'll be interested to see how DOJ goes. And a lot of these other positions, does Trump even really know what the Secretary of State does? I'm not sure. And the positions where he wants somebody to look the part, it is important to him that the people that he feels like have shunned him his whole life, like the New York Times, etc., submit to him and now call him sir and say, yes, sir, you're in charge, you're the best, you're the greatest. And I think that in some ways is going to yield a slightly higher quality cabinet secretary than you might otherwise have thought of for positions such as Treasury and Secretary of State. And I think that maybe there's something like that at play here. Am I overthinking that, Marc Caputo? Is there something else at play other than the Trump ego stroking?
I don't know if you're overthinking it. I hadn't thought of it before, but I tend to underthink you. So my best guess is that, and this is not conflicting with what you're saying, is I'm an Occam's razor guy, especially with Donald Trump, that the simplest explanation is the likeliest. He likes Rubio. He came to really like Rubio's foreign policy. Rubio was the de facto Secretary of State for the Western Hemisphere during Trump's first term. They grew rather close together. There's a story I alluded to.
Wait, what do you mean by that? Sorry, de facto Secretary of State in the first term? How so?
In the Western Hemisphere, yeah.
How so?
Rubio helped set policy on Cuba. He drafted, now with Mario Diaz-Balart, the congressman from Miami, the Cuba policy that cracked down on the sanctions and sort of reversed the rapprochement that Obama had put in place with the Castro regime. He was instrumental in doing the same thing, cracking down on Venezuela. He raised the alarm about Nicaragua and the regime there. And he has just been a consistent anti-communist, much in keeping with a lot of Cuban-American members of the exile community here, the hardline anti-Castro, anti-communist position that is just sort of endemic here in Miami. And there's one interesting story that I kind of alluded to in the Bulwark when I was writing about Rubio as possible VP, which was there was one point where Maduro had essentially crushed Juan Guaido, who had probably beaten him in the presidential elections, and there was all this chicanery. And there were voices in the administration who were saying, we should actually use military action and help depose Maduro. And Rubio, according to the sources I'd spoken to, including one person in the room, had actually set out a map in the White House for Trump to look at. And despite Rubio's war hawk reputation, had pointed out, this is a bad idea. Here's where these battle carrier groups are. Here's why you can't do this. But then he finally sold Trump, allegedly, on why not to do military action in Venezuela, because he put it in real estate terms for the developer. And he's like, look, this is land that once you get it and once you go in there, you own it. And you just look at Iraq and it's going to be a problem. So Trump has liked him since then.
Okay, so he's good with visual aids. That's an important role. That's an important skill set for the Secretary of State, generally speaking, visual aids. I do wonder, Mark, Sam, we'll let you talk next after this. I hear what you're saying about how in this case, I guess Rubio, was taking the don't intervene position, which aligns with the Trump instinct. He does seem in conflict. I mean, I've already seen some of the lefty, progressive types, some of the folks from that, the Glenn Greenwalds of the world have to be pretty unhappy with this, right? The Tulsis. Like, this is not like a Tulsi choice. This is somebody that has been...
It's not a Roger Stone choice.
Yeah, his instinct, Marcos, has been towards war, towards conflict with Iran, towards conflict with China, towards conflict, he was just unapologetic. I guess he's aligned with Trump on this, but unapologetic on the attacks on Hamas in Gaza. Who cares about civilian casualties? Marco doesn't. He said that several times. And so, I do think that seems to be in conflict in Trump in certain ways. He came around a little bit on Ukraine. He voted no on that last Ukraine package, which I think probably helped him here. But generally, how do you make sense of that conflict with Trump positioning himself as the anti-war candidate and then choosing probably the most hawkish of his 2016 opponents?
Just me speculating. You are right, by the way, about Ukraine. Some sources I know had spoken to him privately and said that, in his heart of hearts, Rubio is much more closely aligned with Biden on Ukraine and sees Ukraine as a good way of bleeding both Russia and China dry. But this is now me speculating, just kind of knowing his mind. Rubio is very transactional and he's very rational and he understands what's going to work and what doesn't work. And this is going to be Trump's administration and you toe the line. And the reality is Rubio's he has a real spy versus spy mind. He's not only on Senate Foreign Relations, he's also on the Senate Intel Committee, and this is the stuff he lives and breathes. And as a sort of an early China critic in Republican politics and in the Senate, his views much more closely align with Trump's than his prior views, and his prior views he's willing to shelve. That is the best guess.
All right, Sam, you've been sitting here listening to all of that. What are your big takeaways?
Well, I nothing to contradict anything said here, but it is sort of worth underscoring how radically he has shifted on some of these things.
Rubio.
For instance, Rubio. For instance, we dug up a clip from 2022 where and we could play it, where he literally said, we have to support Ukraine for, quote, as long as they're willing to fight.
No matter what, there always has to be a real, legitimate Ukrainian state that we have a relationship with. And I don't know why we can't begin to openly say we will support them as long as they are willing to fight, even if it's an insurgency.
2022, not exactly ancient history there. What year are we in now? It's been a long week. Are we in 2024?
It's dog years, dude. That's centuries.
Okay, so that was just 2 years
And,
ago.
obviously there's plenty of clips out there. A couple
Marco does look, we should have just said, Marco does look a lot younger in that 2016 clip we played earlier. Like his skin looks better, his ears are significantly smaller. And so you do notice a kind of a big difference in him visually from 2016 to now. But 2022 to now, that's pretty more recent, I guess I would say.
Yes, I agree. Obviously you can pull all the stuff about the
you
Iran.
can make Kaplan Sibelius penis jokes, but I can't make fun of Marco's ears? What are the rules?
There's lines. There are lines here. Okay, you crossed one there. You can look at all the stuff he said about Iran.
Sam's really, because if you make fun of Sam's ears, he gets really pissed off.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's all right. Am I going to get to speak? No. Iran, you could go through Afghanistan, the withdrawal. You can talk about, Israel, Hamas. It's hawkish. I mean, I'm genuinely surprised, actually, because I just figured that Trump looked at him and thought he was just kind of a insignificant little gnat. And it also sort of, in a weird way, couple that with the Mike Waltz pick, and you basically have like a national security apparatus that is relatively hawkish. And this is for a candidate who ran adamantly as a non-interventionist. And to Tim's point, the Tulsi Gabbards of the world, the Glenn Greenwalds of the world, the people who supported J.D. Vance, and all those operatives who basically came of age hating the Iraq war from a conservative perspective and recoiling at U.S. involvement overseas. And I mean, Trump at the end of the campaign was warning about getting to World War III and saying, conjuring up images of draft cards being handed to little Johnny and, America's mothers couldn't afford it and all that stuff. These are somewhat controversial picks, and I'm kind of surprised he's doing it, to be honest.
No, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised at all. Not only is there the personal relationship there, but
I honestly thought people like Grinnell, but that you would know better.
Grinnell just number one, I don't think Grinnell really tried that hard for it, and secondly, Grinnell has got a lot of foreign contracts and potential entanglements.
That would definitely trip up Trump, who's known to not like foreign contracts and entanglements. Yes.
Well, it'll trip up Trump if other people have. If he's got it, it's not a problem. I think there's
I'm sorry. This is again. You don't have to betray reporting if you're not ready to. But so, are you implying that Grinnell doesn't want to go in the admin at all? He wants to stay on the outside where he can.
That's possible. Yes. Now, I need to be careful with what I say because I don't want to betray any confidence. I'm doing this on the fly. But I don't think Rick Grinnell said, yes, I definitely want this position.
Interesting.
And the reality is outside of Rubio having demonstrated his foreign policy chops with Trump repeatedly when Trump was president and having proposed such good policy that Joe Biden kept it. Joe Biden kept Marco Rubio's, Donald Trump's, Cuba policy.
Right.
He kept Marco Rubio, Donald Trump's Venezuela policy.
Right. I mean, he built off the Abraham Accords. He stuck with the Afghanistan withdrawal deadline. I mean, there are continuations, no doubt. My point is just that the campaign was not waged on foreign policy. I mean, it was waged on it, but it wasn't decided on foreign policy. But if you were to define and look at Trump's foreign policy during the campaign, it was quite clearly a non-interventionist, we need to untangle from the world type of approach. And Marco Rubio does not strike me as someone in that vein. I don't think he's, I have to look it up, but I don't think he's hypercritical of NATO, right? I don't think so.
Waltz was.
Yes. But they're both China hawks. I mean, Trump's kind of a China hawk on on economic policy stuff, but he's not he's not looking for war with China. I don't think he's ever gave a really substantive answer about Taiwan and what he would do there. And it seemed, I guess maybe I was conditioned to expect a Tulsi Gabbard type choice. And I
the last thing, he also speaks fluent Spanish. And that really helps in having one of your foreign policy advisors. And then in addition to that, there's a huge Florida man aspect to this. So not only do they have that kind of personal relationship, but Susie Wiles, the chief of staff and the former campaign manager for Trump, huge Rubio fan. Trump's former ambassador to the Organization of American States, Carlos Trujillo, is a Rubio understudy, also from Miami. There are just all of these like tight patterns here.
There's a lot of Florida and New York components to this.
I mean, Florida's like we're already the sixth borough anyway, right?
I guess. Yeah, I have one more thought on this or question, I guess, for you, Caputo, that will I think come into a little bit more clarity in 2 weeks than right now. But is there anything that is to be said about how he feels a little there is not this need to appease the full MAGA crowd? It just isn't a full MAGA choice, I guess, is my question. And so is this a one-off burst on relationships, or do we think that will bear itself out in other selections? Because, I was expecting more of a full MAGA choice, I guess is my point.
I always, and I'm going to mispronounce it because I've always meant to take Spanish, and I never did, but the phrase is something like lo que salga de los cojones, which is like whatever comes out of his balls.
Hey, Mark, that sounds authentic. That was great.
Yeah, it's a Cuban term, or a Spanish term for strongmen, and that defines Donald Trump. Like, what he wants to do is what he's going to do. And I think the overarching thing so far to understand is Donald Trump's first term and the beginning of his administration was just sort of a total shit show. And
so, as was
I believe...
But there was that magic period right in the middle.
And the middle. Okay.
Was there a period in the middle where it was less
that
crazy?
Magic week. It was that really great
There was like 4 or 5 weeks where he was about to be president at that point.
I think Van Jones said he became president.
Yeah, that was when he bombed Syria.
But I think Donald Trump, and I could be totally wrong here, understands that personnel is policy, and he has... Even though he believes he's immortal and he's going to be alive forever and time will never defeat him, is that he's got about 18 months to really make a difference and do the things he wants to do. And he has to have good, competent people around him. That doesn't mean he's going to pick all good, competent people. And that doesn't necessarily mean I agree with the idea that Rubio is a good, competent person. But when you judge all of the possible people he could have picked, this pick in that framework makes a lot of sense.
I think if we're being honest about it, it's not Vivek, it's not Tulsi. Look, I think Lee Zeldin at EPA, like, if you're an honest environmentalist, you're like, it could have been a lot worse. If you look at Lily Stefanik at UN, like, she's there to like create viral
job
moments.
Is a stupid job that doesn't matter anyway.
And so they don't care about the UN.
Okay, we'll keep looking. I guess I think it's a mixed result so far. I mean, we knew that Homan, Tom Homan, and Stephen Miller were going to oversee immigration.
And then
those are
there's
very
reports,
MAGA picks.
And then there's reports that RFK Jr. is like trying to staff 600 people at HHS, and I'm like, boy, get my fluoride drops now before before we really need them, right? Like, that's the stuff that's scary, but this stuff is not as scary, I suppose.
No, Florida's the scary stuff. It turns you into a communist. I'm sorry, wrong crowd for that joke.
Was that really right?
No.
That's from Dr. Strangelove, where the character is like talking about
I haven't seen any movies before 1986. Okay,
fine.
Guys, thank you so much. Little Marco's
now
come
Big Marco.
a long way since 2016. Little man. We got to put the chair up. Let's end with that. If you made it this long, you deserve the pick.
That one.
Little man in a big chair, and his big chair will be in Foggy Bottom going forward. Thanks to Sam Stein and Marc Caputo. We'll see you guys soon. Subscribe.